Senate reversed course on limiting President Trump's power in the Iran war in an effort to placate the president after an extremely tense lunch on Capitol Hill. Trump walked into the building and has already sparked frustration on his part and had a tense meeting, a tense luncheon there on Capitol Hill. Posted on social media, he refused to sign a housing bill that was passed by a near unanimous vote until his voting act also passes Congress. Senator Alan Armstrong of Oklahoma was at that Senate Republican lunch with the president, and we asked him about the housing bill as well as the president's interactions with lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
I think that was obviously a surprise to everybody, and I think caught everybody off guard there a little bit. I think, clearly the president's trying to make a strong statement about how important Save America Act is to him personally, and I think he certainly got his point across on that.
There was this meeting that followed with the president, and I would love your readout on what transpired there. We've heard that Senator Cassidy was the subject of a great deal of anger from the president. What was the mood in that room? What did you hear from the president about what he wants to have happen here for that bill to get signed into law?
Yeah, I think he just continues to express the importance of getting our voting here, something that everybody can trust and be dependent on. And I think that's obviously very important to him. But, I'm not going to make any comments on what exactly went on in the room. But obviously that's very important to the president. He continues to press on that. And but, it's a private conversation for good reason. And I think we should have more, frankly. I think there ought to be more of those private conversations and working out differences rather than letting them work their way out into the public.
You said the president got his point across that this voting act is really important to him, but this housing act was really important to Republicans, especially Republicans who are trying to run in tight races come the fall, because one of the things that voters say over and over again when asked they're focused on, it's these kitchen table issues, and housing has gotten so expensive in this country. Are you disappointed that the bill didn't get passed?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of important work that we need to be doing. Permitting reform is obviously something I think is actually more important than any of those issues that we've been talking about, because it's something that's really holding our nation back. It's a huge tax against our economy. And it really is very crucial to our future to be able to get back to building things here with certainty, with lower costs, and being able to put capital to work in our country to power our future. And so I would just say, yes, there's a lot of important things that need to get done. And this is a place where people obviously express what they think is most important to them. And certainly that's what the president was doing.
Tell us a bit what you've heard from your constituents, from Oklahomans, about housing in particular. So, Christina, bring up the fact that affordability is such a big issue here going into the midterms. What are you hearing from your constituents about the need for progress? Yes, on permitting reform, but just on affordable housing more broadly.
Yeah, I would say that's not a front and center issue in Oklahoma. We have a very low cost of living in Oklahoma, and our governor is, really, Governor Stitt's done a great job of making Oklahoma a place of low cost of living. And things that people do, that things like blocking infrastructure and raising people's utility costs, are actually things that we can do without spending money, without making tax breaks. One of the things I think is most interesting to me about the housing bill is that in the housing bill, some of the key elements of it, we're doing NEPA waivers. So in other words, waiving the NEPA laws that is all about our permitting reform. You saw that same thing in the CHIPS Act. So rather than actually fixing the problem and dealing with permitting reform, we keep putting on gloves to fix a leaky pin as it relates to our permitting process. And to me, that was a really stark issue for me on the housing bill. But even getting affordable housing is being impacted by how litigated all of our permitting processes have become here in the U.S.
Well, I know another big cost is energy, and you are trying to address that and some of these issues in a new bill you're proposing. You want to run us through that? I mean, I know you have a lot of experience in the private sector when it comes to energy. What are you trying to get Washington to do from somebody who's been out there in the trenches where bottom lines and profits do actually matter?
Yeah, you know, I've watched this for 40 years in my career on the private side, and I've just seen it get worse and worse and worse. Now, listen, for a company like the Williams Companies, where I was the CEO, that has a lot of the big incumbent pipelines, has the nation's largest pipeline, when you're the incumbent and it's hard to build new stuff, that's actually not a very bad business environment. But I think looking at it long term, realizing that you're just raising the price to consumers more and more, ultimately that's not a good thing for our country, certainly not a good thing for the consumers. And so it's one of the reasons that I actually took this role. In fact, it's the primary reason I took this role, was to try to do my best to kind of raise concern over how much our processes are costing the American people. People will get upset about their utility prices, and everybody wants to blame it on something other than the fact that our political processes today stand in the way of us being able to build infrastructure and connect abundant resources that we are very blessed with here in the U.S. to the consumer. If we had too much infrastructure, it would be the infrastructure companies, the pipeline companies, the power transmission companies, they would be competing and having to lower their prices to be able to deliver that product. But as it is, we've got bottlenecked and constrained infrastructure, and that's actually what's raising the price to consumers.
I definitely want to ask you about the talks that are underway between the U.S. and Iran, but let me get into them by asking about what the president said a couple of times over the course of the week. That is, he's been very critical of gasoline companies for those prices not coming down as fast as we've seen oil prices come down. And I wonder what you would say to him, what you would say to somebody who maybe doesn't know how this works, why we're not seeing the kind of diminution in gas prices as quickly as certainly the president wants. There's a long lag time here. Yeah,
and there always is. It's the way the market works. It's not like if price of oil goes down, you know, in one day, that the person that bought that gasoline, the person that bought the oil to run it through the refinery, to then put it in a tank, to then take it through their pipelines, to then go to a storage facility there in the local area, and then finally wind up when you squeeze on the handle at the pump. That's a long, long transit time. And so it's not like that the price of that product just immediately gets lowered at the place that you're delivering the pumping. In the retail gasoline business, it's called the shelf. And so you have prices stay up for a little bit longer. It's a profitable time for the retail gasoline, but guess what? On the way up, on the other direction, they have to bear the other side of that coin. So, I mean, you can track this. This is nothing new and nothing unusual to see retail gasoline and diesel prices lag the price of oil. In fact, it would be very unusual if that happened, frankly.
But shouldn't the president know that, or at least have someone who can explain it to him? Do you want to go over to the White House and maybe let him know that this is how this goes?
Yeah, I think, the president's got great advisors like Chris Wright in the House, in his cabinet that certainly understand that. And I think he's been working hard to get the Strait of Hormuz open, and he's just wanting to see that immediate gratification of that showing up. But it's the same thing, honestly, it's the same thing with the permitting issues. There's not immediate gratification around fixing permitting reform. You have to fix it, and then you have to let the infrastructure get built over time to see the benefit of it. But I do think it is something that he's been fighting hard to get Strait of Hormuz open. He's thrilled to see oil prices coming down as hard as they are, and now he's wanting to see it show up at the pump.
Speaking of permitting, you were talking about infrastructure and getting more energy and more of these facilities online. The administration has done a lot to take away some of the regulatory hurdles for these new nuclear startups being worked out. These like kind of startup-y, I don't know, nuclear and startup don't really seem to go together in my mind, so I don't think I can get the sentence out. But I know that there has been some controversy about some of these deregulations, but also feasibility and whether or not this is really the best place to invest this, because because so far, none of these startups are anywhere close to production and won't be for quite a few years. Is that where the administration, where the country should be focusing when it comes to new forms of energy, or are there quicker, simpler ways to get that grid up and running faster?
Well, I think we need to be focused on any and all kinds of energy, and I think we should never stop trying to bring innovation forward to be able to have long-term sources of energy. So things like fusion, which is not what the small modular reactors are, but long-term, we as a country have the ability to invest in research and develop, and frankly, the old model that we have of the large reactors is a very expensive, very risky process. You can certainly ask the Southern companies with their big project in Vogtle, which was the last big nuclear facility brought online, and it's a very difficult regulatory process. I think the effort that's going on that I think is really worthy of the U.S. paying attention to and trying to invest in is how do we take the energy from nuclear and make it simpler to actually be able to extract that energy, extract that heat, and make it commercial. The old way we've done things is big, complex, super expensive, and we certainly should. And I think the industry really got set back hard after some incidents and really was kind of back on its heels, and nobody really was willing to invest in innovation looking forward because it had such a bad name, and it kind of really crippled the ability to invest in innovation. So yes, I think we should be investing in innovation there, and I think we ought to be continue to pursue anything. Energy is such a vital part of any economy, and we would be foolish, I think, not to be investing in research to be able to bring that energy to us at a much lower cost in the future.
Just a last question here. You're about to embark on a recess that I think goes until July the 13th. You, of course, are not going to be in the Senate for a very long period of time. You're filling a term that was vacated by Mark Wayne Mullen, who's now the Secretary of Homeland Security. I'm going to characterize you as kind of a single-issue senator in the short tenure that you have there. You're really focused on this issue of permitting reform. I'm curious, these few months into your tenure, that's not going to be a very long tenure, what surprised you about the place in terms of how difficult it is to make progress, how hard it is to get advancements on the issue or the issues that you care about?
Yeah, well, I hope that what I'm experiencing is an anomaly that's associated with being right ahead of the midterms, because there certainly seems to be a lot of effort just to make sure that the current administration and the Republican Party in general is not successful in getting productive things done. That's unfortunate, but that's certainly one of the things that surprised me the most is kind of how low on the list it is from a party's perspective, and particularly Democratic Party leadership in particular. In this case, how much their focus is on just making sure nothing productive gets done. And I really don't come at that like you probably think I would as an Oklahoma Republican. I am actually very moderate, and I've always think we should always put our country first, well ahead of our parties. And but it's been kind of shocking to me to see how low on the list there what's best for our country is in the list of considerations in those debates.